Good morning, I'm Annie Larkin, the Associate Curator of Public Programs at the Amerind Museum. Welcome to Collaborating with Place with Artist Shawn Skabelund. Before we begin the program today, I want to acknowledge that Amerind is located in southeastern Arizona, on lands where the O'odham, Hopi, Oshwe, and Yoemeth and Apache families lived for untold generations, and whose wisdom and traditions live on today in vibrant communities. We are grateful for what all of these communities, rich in history, have to teach us. Thank you to our members and donors who enable Amerind to provide free online programming and fulfill Amerind's mission to promote the knowledge and understanding of Native peoples of the Americas through research, education, conservation, and community engagement. To learn how you can assist Amerind in supporting its mission and programs by becoming a member or donor, please visit amerind.org. On November 6th at 11 a.m., Amerind will host the free online lecture, From the Long Walk to the Skywalk, A Brief History of the Hualapai People with Dr. Jeffrey P. Shepard. Please visit the events section of Amerind's Facebook page or website, amerind.org, for online program registration details. Then on November 20th at 11 a.m. Arizona time, Amerind will host the free online lecture Comanche and Germans on the Texas Frontier with Daniel J. Jello and Christopher J. Wickham. Please visit the events section of Amerind's Facebook page or amerind.org for program details. Okay, Shawn Skabelund is an artist, educator, and independent curator based in Flagstaff, Arizona, working with and in specific landscapes to reveal their complex issues, ecologies, and cultural histories. Shawn grew up in the small logging town of McCall, Idaho, in the mountains of the Payette National Forest. His fondest childhood memories were of days picking huckleberries, which would become the root of his creative process. He received his Master of Fine Arts in Drawing and Painting from the University of Iowa in 1990, and his Bachelor of Arts in Drawing from Utah State University in 1987. Shawn's artwork is currently on display at Amerind in the multi-artist exhibition Parched, and Parched is on display at Amerind until January 16th, 2022. And if you would like to ask any questions during the program today, please type your questions in the Q&A chat box. We'll gather those questions to share with our speaker after the presentation, and we're also recording today's program, and a link to the video will be sent out to all of our Zoom registrants later today. And with that, I would like to welcome Shawn.
Thank you, Annie. This is exciting, and I'm just going to jump right into this lecture. I got a lot of images to show you and share with you. And I begin with a drawing I did when I was at Utah State University. I share this with you because my career began in drawing. My site-specific, place-based, large-scale installations come out of my drawing background. Drawing for me has always been a physical act. The use of my whole body, especially coming from 8 years of art school, where drawing from the model was my sole practice, my love, and continues to be so today. My passion for creating installation art, specifically place-based art, with themes concerning the interaction and interdependence of culture and nature, manifest destiny and its historical and contemporary impact on specific landscapes, peoples, and cultures, and the circle of life and death all harken back to this drawing that you see, titled Roadkill Number 1. Done in charcoal, Conte crayon, and shoe polish, it comes from an actual experience I had of watching a deer take its last few breaths after being hit by a car and then collapse and die. As an undergrad, I was looking at the work of Franz Marc. Marc was part of the Blue Rider movement. This is his 1913 painting titled The Fate of the Animals, done before the impending World War. This was my drawing done from that painting. Here is a small watercolor done by Mark. I then recreated it compositionally in charcoal, overlaying my shadow over the top of the deer, and titled it Self-Portrait. I now share with you two drawings I did as a graduate student at the University of Iowa. Both of these drawings were pivotal in my career in becoming an installation artist. There is nothing particular about this first drawing, but after completing it, I hung a bundle of honey locust thorns in front of it as part of the finished work, combining a three-dimensional element to the work. The second drawing was this one. At the time, I was trying to figure out how to create a drawing without using my hands. I attached a map of the United States to a sheet of drawing paper and then laid the paper in front of my studio door. Each time I would enter the studio, I would walk across the paper. The drawing literally became a performative act, symbolizing manifest destiny. After this semester-long act, I then drew a heartline arrow across the map in red crayon. The heartline comes from a Native American pre-hunt ritual, where they would draw an image of the animal they were going to be hunting and then draw an arrow leading from the mouth to the heart. They believed that by performing this act, they had already captured the spirit of the animal and that the hunt was just a matter of collecting the physical body. For me, I took this ritual, turned it upside down on its head, and it became a symbol of manifest destiny. How the destiny of this country was manifested both historically and continues on today by the marks we make across the landscape. The heartline would show up in my future installations as a symbol of life, which you will see. One of the most important and influential artists in my career was the German artist Joseph Beuys. His personal narratives and this performative piece titled, "I Like America, America Likes Me," when he lived with a coyote in a New York gallery, instilled in me the power, the possibility, and the imagination of art and what it could be and what I could do and say through my own work. After graduate school, I moved to the state of Washington and lived near the Canadian border for 10 months. One winter morning, I looked out across the field and saw this shape lying in the snow. I went to investigate. The shape became a form, the form a coyote. It had been shot by my neighbor and then traversed a quarter mile, leaving a trail of crimson blood until it collapsed on the property I was living on. I collected its body and built a burial scaffold on the property I was living on. A year later, I traveled back to Washington to collect its bones. While in Washington, I was invited to create my first site-specific, place-based installation in the art gallery at Whitworth College. My desire was to create installations that are designed specifically for the space where they are to be exhibited at. And they are place-based because the concept of the work is based specifically on that place. In preparation for each installation, I will spend several months researching the history of that place, or what I call collaborating with the place. What and who was there before European Americans arrived, how that country was as Wendell Berry states, unsettled, and the new culture and economy that was derived out of and within that landscape. For this first installation, titled "A Line Issued Out of the Ground," I explored the history of dam construction on the Columbia River and its impact on the Chinook salmon. How a species several million years old can suddenly be extirpated within 40 years. I designed an installation specifically looking at this issue and designed specifically for this gallery. What you see is a plywood trough, the same width as the two circular air ducts that run along the ceiling. This trough was placed directly underneath. I then drew a meandering 1/4 inch wide line with my router and filled this line with melted pine, lodgepole pine pitch that I had collected. I had hired a logger to salvage several dozen 10-foot lodgepole pine and Douglas fir logs from a cut he was doing. And then he took them to the Spokane Indian Reservation sawmill to have the bark removed. Here we are loading the logs onto the truck to take them to the gallery. This is a photo taken after the first log has been set in. You notice that I have moved all the gallery lighting from the right side of the gallery to the left side. Also notice the line drawn into the plywood, signifying the Columbia River, and hearkening back to the heart line we saw earlier. I purposely set each log close enough so that the viewer could not get his or her head between them. My desire was to have them have the same frustration that salmon have when they are returning upstream to their spawning grounds and a concrete dam blocks their path. And here's an image of the finished installation that you would see as you entered the gallery doors. This is an image taken from the center of the installation, looking down onto it. And then before setting in the last log, I set my tripod inside the installation and photographed this view. And then turned the tripod around and photographed the view of the two Chinook salmon skeletons symbolically swimming upstream. This is a close-up detail of one of the salmon skeletons that I had prepared. The salmon had come to me frozen. A graduate student was doing genetic research on them. And I took them and parboiled them, stripped the meat off of them. We then dried them and put them in the bug room so that the bugs could clean them up for several weeks. And then at the end of that process, I re-articulated them for my work of art. This is a view looking down on the skeletons, one of the fish, and then the shadow of that fish in parallel with the bend of the river. When my wife and I moved from Iowa City to Ann Arbor, Michigan, our landlord asked me to clean up and get rid of the compost I'd made for our garden. In so doing, I found these beautiful forms at the bottom of the compost and realized what they were. They were broccoli stalks and roots that I had thrown into the compost several months earlier. I found them to be so beautiful that I wrote up an installation proposal for the art gallery at Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa. My proposal was accepted, which meant I had to go to work. I rented a garden plot and grew from seed 900 broccoli plants. Michigan, a northern state, is perfect for growing broccoli, which is a cold weather loving plant. Commercially, they grow lots of broccoli there. Broccoli originated from the Mediterranean region and was hybridized over time from cabbage. My desire was to create an installation that explored industrial agriculture within the Midwest and its impact on indigenous natural communities and ecosystems. Here you see me weeding my broccoli garden. This is an image of the morning we are to harvest the plants. Here is a perfect specimen for my installation. Here we are soaking the soil with water so that we can gently pull out the plants in order to preserve the roots. I selected 350 of the plants, laid them out on the lawn, and then took their leaves off. Then, duplicating nature and what had happened in my compost, I rented a deep freezer and froze them for a month. I then made this clothesline and dried them for 2 months in the sun. Here is a detail of one of those broccoli plants. I then scraped the green skin off with a pocket knife so that I could get to the wooden bone-like structure that you see here. I then installed my installation titled A New World Burial at the art gallery at Cornell College. The installation you see here was part of an exhibit titled Technology, Art, and the Transformation of Community on the Michigan State campus in Lansing. My 30-foot by 28-foot installation was so big that they had me install it in the ballroom at the Marriott Hotel on campus. What you see is over 250 broccoli stalks embedded in a ton of organic cornmeal. Broccoli symbolizes an old world European plant sown in the native soils of this country, symbolized by the cornmeal. The plants are cultivated in lines and then slowly peter out at the dark circular shape at the top. Once again, the bed of cornmeal became my drawing paper. The broccoli, my charcoal, drawn into the flat plane. At the far end, the coyote skeleton, the same one that I had collected in Washington a few years earlier, symbolizing the marginalization of native cultures and ecosystems due to large-scale industrial agrarian practices. Keep in mind that NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, had just been passed. So the installation was also a commentary on what that trade law would do to both farmers within the United States, as well as corn farmers in Mexico. During my research for one of my installations, I came upon this photo owned by the Detroit Public Library. It is a photo of a mountain of bison skulls taken outside the Detroit Carbon Works. When the federal government warranted the slaughter of the bison to rid the Great Plains of the indigenous tribes living there, they purposely slaughtered millions and millions of bison. The animal was the main source of food, clothing, and shelter for these people. Someone realized there was a profit to be made and collected the hundreds of thousands of bones scattered across the prairie. Bones which were then processed and made into fertilizer. The fertilizer was then shipped back to the farms in the Midwest. Seeing this photograph, I wanted to create an installation that explored this massive slaughter and also the circular history of this native animal. Having seen a similar sculpture by Bruce Nauman in Munich, I fabricated my own carousel that pulled 4 bison skulls through a bed of cornmeal, each one plowing into the native soils of this country. The work was very mesmerizing to watch, each skull drawing into the cornmeal. Keep in mind, Detroit wasn't the only city where these bones were shipped to. Baltimore, Philadelphia, and St. Louis also had processing centers. When she saw this installation, Lori Poirier, president of First Nation and a member of the Lakota Nation, remarked how it reminded her of the sun dance ceremony that her people used to perform. And this installation was titled A Toll on Earth. In 1999, I was invited to the University of Alaska in Anchorage to explore the story of Alaska in an installation titled Land of Exploitation. Seward's Folly would become a province for the plundering of natural resources to be shipped to the lower 48. My installation happened to coincide with the 10th anniversary of the Exxon Valdez spill. For Land of Exploitation, river gravel became my drawing paper, the base of my installation. Why river gravel? When the 700-mile-long pipe from the North Slope to Valdez was built, a material was needed to protect and insulate the permafrost from thawing out due to the 200-degree oil coming directly out of the earth and into the pipe. River gravel became that insulating material. The bed that you see is 35 feet long and 6 feet wide. It is 6 inches deep. Embedded in the gravel are 4 circular pans filled with oil, and hanging above 3 of the pans is a gallbladder, also filled with oil. Behind is a spruce beam, and cut into this beam is a routed outline where oil flows down and pours into the first pan. Once again, this line flowing with oil harkens back to the heart line. Attached to the vertical totem at the end of the installation are skulls of 7 animals indigenous to Alaska. Beluga whale at the top, then polar bear, Arctic wolf, sea lion, sea otter, seal, and finally salmon at the bottom where the oil flows out of. In 1998, my family moved from Ann Arbor, Michigan to Flagstaff for my wife's teaching position at Northern Arizona University. On an early hike along the West Rim Trail, we came upon a chain link fence blocking our path. The signage read, "Do not enter," and "Danger, keep out." I was curious and wanted to find out why. There was buildings there and a fence to keep us out. So I decided I would learn about this closed-off area. 12 years later, in 2011, I was invited to be an artist in residence on the south rim of the Grand Canyon. My proposal to explore the history of uranium mining within Grand Canyon and within the park and create an installation based on that research was accepted. In May of that year, I spent 3 weeks living in the apartment of Verkamp's Visitor Center, which you see here. This was my view from my apartment. During my residency, I spent time at the park's archives, perusing the original documents and contracts that allowed uranium mining to occur within the canyon and within the park. What you see is a collection of photos given to me of the historical orphan mine on the edge of the canyon. This was the 20-acre mine's infrastructure at the rim of the canyon. This is a picture showing uranium ore being loaded onto a dump truck to be transported to the mill and processed there in Tuba City on the Navajo Reservation. And a photo of the head frame that lifted the ore out of the canyon. This is a photograph I took of the glory hole where the ore had come out of the earth, photographed at Hopi Point. And then an image I took a few years after my residency of the 20 acres the mine covered on the rim of the canyon. The area is now covered in plastic sheeting with sandbags to prevent uranium mining or uranium from broadcasting. A year later, in 2012, I was invited to install my installation titled "The Price of Entrance" inside the lobby of the park headquarters building. As you enter the building, this is what you would have seen at the time. A vinyl map of the Colorado River covering the flagstone floor with 8 photographs of specific sites along the river. You also will notice the banners hanging from the ceiling. I then recreated the map by constructing a new abstract map built using ponderosa pine lumber, and each photograph is covered with a concrete plate. This is an image of the finished installation. Sewer pipes are placed on the map where the 2 semi-active uranium mines exist today within the greater Grand Canyon ecosystem. The sewer pipes come from the old historic Grand Canyon Village sewer line I had discovered in the forest during my residency. Again, notice the contour of the Colorado River drawn out in melted ponderosa pine pitch. In preparation for this installation, I needed a material that would signify uranium and discovered I could collect and use pine pollen. So I collected thousands of pollen cones and separated the pollen from the cones. This is a detail showing that pine pollen capping the top of one of the sewer pipes. I also recreated the banners and sewed them out of muslin, and each banner pocketed a cottonwood leaf at the bottom. I now turn your attention to two of my installations that have been and are part of the Parched exhibit. The first installation that was designed specifically for the exhibit at the Coconino Center for the Arts in Flagstaff. It was a 22-foot diameter steel basin filled with cattail down. My desire was to use a material that looked like and symbolized snow to represent the artificial snow made from effluent reclaimed water and then sprayed onto the flanks of the sacred San Francisco peaks. Hanging at the axis of this circular basin is a cottonwood leaf stained black. The second installation that I created for Parched, now on view at the Amerind Museum, is titled "Our Loss Becomes Extraordinary by Its Vanishing." I'd like to read from my artist statement about this piece. The 140-mile-long northward flowing San Pedro, once known as the Beaver River because of the abundance of beaver that once lived in its waters, is one of the last surviving free-flowing rivers in the Southwest. It disappears underground and then reemerges downstream depending on the level of the underground aquifer. Today, the flow of San Pedro's waters is determined by the unregulated drilling of wells, the amount of pumping that occurs within those wells, and a warming, drier climate. The laws of Arizona don't consider the rights of rivers, nor do they take into consideration the non-human constituents that inhabit those rivers. This lack of regulation continues to threaten the lush green San Pedro corridor of biodiversity. Along with a warming climate, this unchecked drilling and pumping has also exacerbated the final disappearance of ciénagas. Ciénagas are marshy wetlands unique to the American Southwest. They were established over the course of 10,000 years after the retreat of the last glacial period. Their loss began with the arrival of Spanish livestock, sheep, in Spain's northern frontier colonies. These four-legged locusts covered the land, destroying these riparian habitats. Then, in the early 1800s, the extirpation of the beaver further compounded these slow-moving water ecosystems. Just as it defined the San Pedro River, the beaver defined the southwestern landscape. Because of its engineering skills and familial social pattern, the beaver was the wisest of all creatures, held in high esteem by the Apache. Before Arizona was granted statehood, when it was still only a territory, hundreds upon hundreds of beaver lodges marked the Gila River, creating reservoirs that controlled seasonal flooding and critical habitat for migrating birds. Beaver eradication led to ecological destruction, changing the once productive and complex braided streams and rivers that fed the ciénagas into staid, waterless depressions. The siphoning of precious groundwater from these wells has already dried up hundreds of Sonegas across the Sonora Desert of Arizona. More than 95% of Sonegas are dead, their value and beauty gone. Their vanishing is our loss. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shawn. We do have some questions. The first is, beyond Parched, where else can we see your work on exhibit?
Good question. Right now, nowhere. No, actually, there is a show. It's a long show, a 4-month show of my work called Under the Pines. And it's in Prescott, Arizona at the Natural History Institute. And it is basically work that has been done within the last 3 to 4 years. So it's relatively brand new work. Half of it was done and has never been seen before because I executed it and installed it at the Institute for the show. And the rest of the work is somewhat older work, but relatively new within 2 or 3 years. So that's on view. I have a video that is coming out next weekend, next Friday night. There's going to be an event here in Flagstaff. I've been working with a 26-foot diameter stock tank, and I collaborated with percussionist. His name is Owen Davis, and we worked with Nicholas Gabe on a video of that performance, and that's coming out next Friday night. And then actually the big show that I will be doing is starting at the end of next summer at the Coconino Center for the Arts. And that will be between 6 and 8 brand new large scale installations for that show.
Oh, wonderful. And how have the residents of the areas in which you have interpreted, how have they responded to your art?
As far as I know, very well. It's hard to tell without. I usually go in and set these things up. I don't even usually return and take them down. So without some sort of comment book, I'm not sure. I hear mainly through emails, from the museum or gallery directors. So as far as I know, very well, especially from the native community, they respect the work quite a bit, mainly because of my how critical I am of the government and what we've done to these people.
And one of your fellow Parched artists is in attendance today, Glory Ticini Campoy. And Glory, I see you have your hand raised. I will permit your microphone if you would like to unmute and ask a question.
Thank you, Shawn. I just sent in a comment. I can read it.
That would be good. Thank
It
you.
is an honor to be in the Parched exhibition with you and the Parched artists, other Parched artists. Your work clearly explains manifest destiny and its impact on people and the ecosystem, earth, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And are you still drawing? And are your drawings included in your Prescott exhibit?
I am still drawing. I draw not as much as I used to, but quite a bit, actually. There are no drawings. Originally, I was going to include a series of drawings in the Prescott show. I actually finished one of the drawings, and the very next week after finishing it, I ended up breaking my neck and in a mountain bike crash, and that put a stop to that whole series. I hope to get back to that series soon. I also continue to do lots of figure drawing. I sort of coordinate the figure drawing open workshop at the local arts center here, where we try to get together, but because of the pandemic, we have not done so for about a year and a half or two. So I'm anxious to reconvene that. And of course, I draw quite a bit in my installations and in preparation for my installations.
And do you provide instruction for those who may be interested in taking classes with you, whether it's virtually or in person, after the pandemic or once it gets a bit?
I do not provide instruction, but I do welcome people to both locally and through distance to contact me, and if they are curious about feedback, I'm more than welcome to give them professional feedback. I did teach art at the university level for nearly 20 years, and even though I left it in 2011 and have been gone for a decade from it, I really enjoy teaching a lot and guiding potential artists or artists in their work.
And you may have touched on this just a short while ago, but what becomes of your installations after an exhibit has closed? What happens to the pieces that you have used to create?
The materials?
Yes.
The materials get recycled for the most part. They're reused. The logs that you saw in the salmon piece, the first installation, were reused for a structure. The cornmeal you saw in the second installation, that was recycled and taken to a pig farm, and pigs used it for their food. So the salmon themselves, the skeletons, they ended up going back to the collection. The skulls, a lot of the materials I use, are loaned to me. So the skulls in the Alaska piece, where you can actually check those out from the Alaska Library in Anchorage. So I was able to do that with them. For the cattail piece, the big cattail piece here in Flagstaff, that same cattail was used, as you see here, it was inside the plexiglass boxes that we fabricated. So I try to reuse the materials as best I can so that they don't go into the landfill.
Fantastic. We really appreciate your time today, Shawn, and sharing your incredible works of art with our audience. And as a reminder, Parched is on exhibit at Amerind now through January 16th, 2022. And I highly encourage people to visit the museum and see the exhibit. It is absolutely stunning, absolutely stunning. And thank you, Shawn.
Thank you, Annie.
And thanks to our audience. We hope to see you again on November 6th for our talk with Dr. Jeffrey Shepard. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.